Hello and welcome to the Whiteboard, your Fulhamish home for all things tactics, data, and some general whimsical musings about Fulham Football Club. It's been a great season. I think we can all agree on that, but we're starting to struggle to take this into perspective now. We are 10th in the league. We've got some good fixtures coming up, but the Whites are going through a really tough patch at the moment. You know, that loss against Bournemouth coming back after the international break has really put us in a bad place. And performances just haven't been what they were at the start of this season. There was so much optimism as we hit the new year, and Fulham's performances just haven't matched up. So this episode, we're going to discuss that drop-off that we've seen in 2023. We're going to have a little conversation about the curious case of Andreas Pereira and also try to come to a consensus on who our first choice wingers are or maybe should be. Joining me, as always, the butter to my bread, the Harrison Reed to my Joao Palhinha, the Aaron Hughes to my Breda Hangeland. It's the Professor, it's Mr. Ben Jarman. Hiya, Ben.
Hello, mate. That is probably the best intro I think I've ever gotten in my time on Fulhamish or just anywhere in real life, to be honest.
Well, we haven't had you for a while, so I think we needed to build it up. Obviously, Ben stationed out in Canada. I presume you tuned in for the performance that came against Bournemouth at the weekend.
I did. I had a 7 a.m. wake up call yesterday for that performance. For the first half, I was not grudging that whatsoever. It was fine. I was watching the sun come up, and Fulham were playing well. Second half was less acceptable.
Yeah, it wasn't a great one in the end. So look, I think the obvious place to start, as we said in the introduction, is this change in performances that we've seen from Fulham this season. You know, 2022, we were really fizzing. It felt like we were giving everyone a game, coming out with great results against all the teams below us. I think there's been a lot of talk around this at the moment. You know, teams in the bottom half, we tend to just sweep aside. And then the teams above us, whilst we weren't winning games, we were giving them a real good go. But recently, I mean, if you take that Brentford game, I think we were weak. We were slow. We were just second best throughout the whole game. Against Arsenal, that 3-0 loss at home, that was really, really feeble. And then that 2-1 loss against Bournemouth, things aren't looking great. And we've had a little dig into it. But before we get into that, just sort of top level view, Joms, how have you seen this second half of the season going? Where do you think Fulham are struggling? Because clearly results haven't been great.
I think where we're struggling is probably twofold. One, in the case of squad depth, in that we just didn't really invest that heavily in January and therefore didn't bolster the squad too much. You look in the midfield and we have four first team players there and we play with a three. So clearly we're stuck for rotation, and then the quality drop off after those four is tremendous. I think the second part is, as we'll come on to, our XG and our projection towards scoring goals has absolutely fallen off a cliff, whether that's because of the absence of Alexander Mitrovic through to injury or suspension or other. And also I think that we just have been taking a lot less risks now. And I think there's also an element where teams aren't as scared as Fulham as they were. And we're becoming very predictable in our build-up. For Bournemouth yesterday, you can almost telegraph what Fulham were going to do. And it wasn't until we had one moment of unscripted madness where we scored that it didn't look like we were ever going to get there. So, yeah, I think that's how I see it.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that to take into account as well is that it's quite funny that at the start of 2023, you know, we had our win against Leicester away from home. We got that win away at Brighton as well, where these were scrappy 1-0 wins, where maybe we didn't deserve, you know, definitely against Brighton, we didn't deserve the 3 points, but likely against Leicester, you'd say the same. But everyone coming out of that would go, well, this is great. You know, this is a new gritty Fulham that pull 3 points, even if they're not playing well, if they're not creating chances. But there is this whole conversation that comes with this sort of reversion to the mean and Fulham's numbers, you know, the results starting to reflect our numbers. And I think we are starting to see the result of this, because there's only so many times you can go into games, be second best and still come away because you finished off the one chance you had. Ultimately, I think that's coming to cost us. And I think this shows it, you know, quite nicely here. If we have a look at, on the left-hand side, you've got 2022. So in the blue, that's our XG. That's what we've created. And in the orange, that's the XG that we've conceded. Now, at the start of the season, that first half, yes, our XG is lower than our expected goals against. But
Mm.
I think the big story here is when you look at what's happened this year. I mean, that drop off from 1.39 expected goals per game to 0.97, that's big. That's a big drop off. And even worse is that it seems like we're starting to concede slightly more chances in games as well, with the expected goals against going up. So really, we've gone in bad directions both ways, with conceding more chances but creating fewer. But I do think that we've got the big problem there, as you look at it, is we're just not creating very much. And I think we've seen that across games this season. Yes, we won at Brighton, but that was our one chance of the game, and it was a half chance at best. It's a great finish from Manor Solomon.
Yep.
Against Arsenal, nothing, and against Bournemouth, it was that one chance for Andreas Pereira, and that's about it. Where do you think these issues are coming from?
I think, well, the issue that I see is that firstly, we were missing Mitrovic for quite a significant period of time during 2023. And then when you look at the depth that we have in that position, it's Alexander Mitrovic and then Carlos Vinicius. And Carlos Vinicius, I'm afraid to say, and I don't like to say it because clearly he's a professional footballer, but like it is night and day between those two. The drop off is so significant. Yesterday against Bournemouth, you would expect that the ball would be able to at least be held up at some moments to bring the team up the pitch, relieve pressure. Doesn't happen. He doesn't create scoring chances, and his link-up play also not great either. I think there also has something to be said, and we'll come on to this, for Andreas Pereira. He floats in and out of games. I'm not sure that his contribution outside of dead balls is even that significant anymore. I think he dropped off a cliff. And I think, as you alluded to before you put up the screen grab, I think that Fulham are kind of reverting to type. The numbers, the underlying numbers throughout all of this have signified that we would probably end up trending this way. We vastly outperformed our XG for large periods of the season. And at times, you could probably see it just optically that some of the goals that we scored were pretty fortunate. Some of them from outside the box, some of them just broke to us kindly. And I also feel like we give up too many high value chances as well. And like, you can't let in 2-3 goals on the regular and expect to win in the Premier League. You can't do that in any league and expect to win. And I don't know if you feel exactly the same or
Yeah,
have
no,
feels.
I absolutely do feel the same. And I think one of the things as well is that we were really benefiting at the start of the season from Mitrovic being fit and in form. And when he is both of those things, he is an elite level finisher. And elite level finishers do outperform their XG, because XG is just an average. This is what the average player in this situation, this is how likely they are to score. And he is above average. And so when he's at his best, he only needs that one chance in a game. He only needs a chance of an XG of 0.2 to bury that, because he is better than the average striker. However, when he's not fit and he's not in form, which has been the entirety of 2023, because he came back from the World Cup and he wasn't fit and he's missed games, he's not burying that one chance he was getting per game. And then you've got a problem, because I don't know really in this squad where the other goals are. We've got Manor Solomon, who has been a godsend coming back from injury, because he's been able to pull goals out of nowhere just due to his ability to shoot from range. But then outside of that, Andreas Pereira, yes, given that he did score against Bournemouth, but that's only his third goal of the season. He's not a goal-scoring midfielder. And then
I was doing the player ratings yesterday and I was absolutely amazed to see that was only his third goal of the season. It feels like he'd scored so many more, or at least been involved directly in so many more. 6 assists, 3 goals this season.
Yeah,
and I think I agree with you. Where are outside of Mitrovic, where do the goals come from?
And I think this was the thing.
Not Willian.
Yeah, last season, Harry Wilson being, really ticking and fizzing, he was a real important part of that team, because he provided double figures goals and assists, and that's huge to have a winger who can do that. But we haven't, for a start, we didn't have him fit for a large part of the season, and him coming back, he doesn't look the same player, and so we haven't replaced those goals there. I love Bobby Decordova-Reid, and we're going to get into these wingers, but again, not really the most prolific of wingers. That's not really his job in this team, even though he is probably a decent finisher for a winger. He doesn't get into those positions. Willian as well is not seemingly getting into natural goal scoring positions. So this is the worry, I think, for Fulham, is that outside of Alexander Mitrovic, who we are relying on to bury the one chance we can create, we're not doing much, and we don't have natural finishers in this squad. So if to make up for that, you need to create lots of chances. If you look at Brighton under Graham Potter, or even under De Zerbi, they are probably lacking a real clinical elite finisher, but they create so many chances a game through the way they play that they get through that.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's an element to Fulham right now that is pedestrian. I feel like they've hit their points targets. They know they're safe. They probably don't want to overextend the squad too much, so they're playing slightly. I would say they're playing at 95%, 90%, and that is, in comparison to how they came flying out the blocks, is totally different. It's night and day in terms of the intensity. Our press was very, very effective. We were winning the ball high, and that, of course, helps contribute to the XG that we saw previously. But since then, I feel like we're a little bit deeper. Therefore, you have to cover a lot more of the pitch. You're looking for your key playmakers to be even more influential than they are now, and you're looking for people that can carry the ball. I'm not necessarily sure that we have people that can carry the ball that far.
No, I agree. I think we don't have natural. I think we have it out wide. In terms of, it's your Solomon's a good ball carrier. He's a good dribbler of the ball. So is Willian. But if you look in the middle of the park, I think we are missing that player who can pick up and drive. I'm thinking of Andre Frank Zambo Anguissa in this situation. A number 8 who gets on the ball and really just drives through the centre of the pitch. I love Harrison Reed, but he's not that player. He's not the player who massively provides that link between defence and attack. And so I agree with you. And maybe to an extent, this is where Sasha Lukic can come in and help, because there's a couple of times I've seen him striding out with the ball where he does have a little bit more of that directness to him. But yeah, it just seems like we struggle to get the ball from back to front in a meaningful way at a tempo that unsettles teams. Against Bournemouth, we got the ball forward really slowly, which meant that it allows them to sit into that bank of 4 at the back, and they defended with ease most of that game.
Yeah, totally agree. I have nothing more to add to any of these points other than the fact that I think, as we're going to come on to right now, it feels like the curious case of Andreas Pereira, where he was so key to us doing all of the good things at the start of the season, but not so much now.
Yeah. So I think let's start with good. I think that if we look at how he sits within this team, so this is just showing him this season in the Premier League. If we're looking at expected assists per 90, which I think is a good metric, because I think sometimes assists, doesn't account for the fact that, Manor Solomon bops one in from 25 yards. The pass that's assisted that doesn't really mean anything. Whereas expected assists, you're looking at actually how good are the chances you're creating. He's the second in our squad in terms of expected assists per 90. Ahead of him, Tom Cairney, which I think makes sense because he is such a wonderfully creative midfielder. Key passes, which is a super simple metric of, passes that lead to a shot, he's first. Shot creating actions through passes. So these are, what he does in order to generate shots in a game. He's 6th in this squad, which I think we'll come on to why I think that's maybe a little bit of a problem. And then dead balls is the really interesting one. He's first in the squad, but 3rd in the entire league for shot creating actions from dead ball situations. Ahead of him are only Kieran Trippier and James Ward-Prowse, who are 2 exceptional set piece takers. And you can clearly put Andreas Pereira into that bracket, as we've seen with free kicks and corners. He has a great delivery on him. And there's a lot of good in there, right, James? Like, clearly he is an important creative player for us.
Yes, totally. He is. I would say he is our most creative player and probably one of our most important players outside of Mitrovic. But I think there is an element to him where he's so in and out of games. He will be influential for the first 25, 30 minutes. And it's almost like he can't control his output, because for the last 60 minutes, he's sort of on the periphery of the game. And I think that if you're a team where we are mid-table, a very thin squad, especially in attacking and skilled areas, you need those players to be able to manage their workload. And I think, firstly, there's an element where this is kind of on him, But more importantly, there's an element where this is going to be on the club, because they didn't reinforce in those areas in January, and we probably should have. But his dead ball actions throughout the whole season have been so crucial to us gaining success. You know, we scored at home against Bournemouth from one of his corners. He scored from the edge of the area against Forest, I think it was, with that huge deflection. You know, there's been a number of times where he has dragged us back up off the mat, as it were. But there are so many times where we're looking to get a foothold in the game, and unfortunately he hasn't been able to quite grasp that. And I think that that's why there could be a ceiling to where he is. And there's an element to me that thinks, you know, if someone is going to come in with 35 million or 25 million in the summer, you know, you might as well bank that, because firstly, it's, you know, 17.5 million pounds in profit. And then, you know, you can probably go out and get a couple of playmakers for that, and you look a little bit more stable for the future.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm in the minority. I think we're in the minority, but he's brought a lot of value to this squad. But in terms of, you know, if you're looking at is it 25 million pounds of irreplaceable value? I don't think so. I think he's, you know, I think we can replace. I think this is the big thing though that you said in terms of drifting in and out of games. Now I've dragged this straight out of FB Ref, which is where all these stats have come from, and it's a great site. But this season in the Premier League compared to every other attacking midfielder. And now these are percentage bars, these are percentiles. So you can see their passes attempted. So he's looking at 35 passes a game, which puts him in the 52nd percentile. Now, the further to the right that bar goes, the better he ranks in this league. And you can see there's a lot of red, and those bars are a lot way over to the left-hand side. And we were speaking about this before, and I think the passes attempted for a start, I think, shows how he drifts in and out of games, because that's quite low. And I'm worried about how low that is, because he is so important in that role he plays in linking play that comes into him from either our fullbacks or from Palhinha and Harrison Reed, and then distributing forward. You know, the job of a number 10, and if you really, really boil it down, I think probably sit in passes attempted and creativity. So we'll say expected assists and stuff like that. And then the bottom stat we have there, which is progressive passes received, which simply means, you know, receiving a forward pass. So something from, if we picture Joao Palhinha playing a pass from midfield 10 yards towards Andreas Pereira, who receives it and then gets us towards the opposition goal. 4.42, which puts him in the 14th percentile. Clearly, I just don't think he's involved enough. You know, he needs to be getting that ball into his feet and making things happen. But I think we saw it against Bournemouth and we saw it against Brentford. This Fulham team seemed to be getting into this monotonous routine of pushing the ball out wide to our fullbacks, who push it onto our winger, and we put a ball into the box. And it's becoming so predictable and so easy to deal with. And I don't know if it's tactical, but to me, I think it's because Andreas Pereira isn't offering enough in the way of making himself available. I think it's too often he's up against that back defensive line, you know, against the back four, against back five. And I don't know what you think, James. Is that because he's, you know, he doesn't want to be on the ball? Is it a confidence thing? Is it partially, I think there's that press that we do where we sort of press in a 4-4-2 where Pereira sits alongside the striker, Mitro or Carlos Vinicius, and presses, and maybe that's a result of that he sits too high. But to me, these numbers, I think, explain exactly the issues that we're raising with Andreas Pereira.
Yeah, I think I only have a couple of top-ups, and just I can't answer the question directly because I'm not Andreas Pereira, but what I think I can probably say is that I think there's an element to it where he might feel a little bit uncomfortable in certain areas and certain situations. And of course, there's an element to this where it's been dictated by the manager. And, you know, I don't want to be critical of Marco Silva, because what he's done for the club in the last 2 years has by far outstripped anyone other than probably Roy Hodgson at this point. But when we look at the Championship last year, there was a period where Fulham, although it sounds bad to say this because they were top of the league, they were quite turgid at points, and they looked like they really needed another spark. And I think we're now at this point again in the season where Fulham, again, are a bit turgid. They're looking for a spark, but there has to be an element where you take the pressure off of Andreas Pereira's shoulders and give it to someone else. Because, you know, as we say, there's only so much where to a point where the creativity drops off, it's like getting to a point of diminishing returns in sort of like a marketing campaign or anything like that. There's only so much before you've squeezed out the orange and there's nothing left. Maybe give someone else a go there. But again, that comes back to who have we really got? We have Bobby Reid that can probably operate in a 10, and we have Tom Cairney who can definitely operate in a 10, but does he give you the dynamism that Andreas comes with? Probably not. You're probably looking for a player that's a mixture of both, which is like a unicorn player. But I think that I think he would just benefit from trying to get on the ball a little bit more, and actually I feel like he probably needs a little bit more support around him. But yeah, that's how I feel about him.
Yeah, I do wonder if there's a brief period here where Tom Cairney might be the answer. Then as you say, you do have to then sacrifice that level of dynamism from your 10, and maybe our first press doesn't have that same intensity to it. But not every team presses with the aggression that we try to. Teams do try and funnel play into central areas. We've got two exceptionally dynamic midfielders in behind the 10 in Harrison Reed and Joao Palhinha. And maybe we should be looking towards Tom Cairney, who loves getting on the ball. Like, that's one of the things that I love so much when he's come on this season, is he constantly floats around, finds space, wants to receive the ball, wants to create things. He keeps things ticking over. And it's just, he doesn't, I don't feel like Andreas Pereira does that. And so maybe there is a case that we try it. I don't know what you think.
I'm 100% for it. I think,
I know we both love Tom Cairney. I think we're both.
I
big
love
fans.
him. Yeah. I can't put into words enough how much I admire what Tom Cairney does for us and has done over the years, and how he's just completely reinvented himself as a player, like 2 or 3 times over for us. And I think that probably goes a little bit under the radar. But I loved his cameo against Bournemouth yesterday. Like, the physicality he brought, I've never seen that from TC before. That level of passion, that was great, and I think I would like him in that 10. We have a run of games coming up against people that are perpetually in the bottom half and have been this season, and I think that's where Fulham are actually struggling to get their foothold in games, is because we're being gifted way too much possession, which in turn is probably making us a little bit more monotonous because we're trying to break through a low block. And I think, if there's one person in the squad that you immediately call out on for more quality on the ball, it is Tom. And I think that, you have to introduce him.
Yeah. And so if we look forward then, I think this is where we move on to our final little segment. If we look forward to West Ham and then beyond that, just this run of fixtures that we've got, coming up against West Ham, Everton, Villa, these are games that we really have to be looking at winning, not because we're in we're not in any danger, and I think also we're not looking up anymore, but I just think more just to keep this season going and not let it just completely fizzle out, because I think if we look at 3 months ago, we really felt this could be a special season, and even if we finish 11th, which I think is probably the lowest we can finish, looking at how far Palace are off in 12th, that's still magic. Finishing 11th, having got relegated in our past 2 campaigns, that's still a fantastic season, but we don't want it to fizzle out in a horrible way. So our big question now is Willian comes back into the fold, and that leaves us with, I personally think, 4 wingers who have got their name in the hat. I don't like putting players down, but I'm just not sure that Dan James adds the same quality that any of the other 4 wingers do. So and I don't see him as a player who Marco Silva would be willing to start. I think he's a player that we can bring on if we're looking for something different in a game, or if we're looking to stretch a team. I think we're looking at Bobby Decordova-Reid, Harry Wilson, Manor Solomon, and Willian.
Yeah.
It's really difficult, I think, to pick between these 4 players because they all have interestingly similar outputs, but they seem to do it in a different way. If you throw up the comparisons, Willian is a really, really different winger to Bobby Decordova-Reid, and he's a really different winger to Manor Solomon. But I don't know what the correct answer is, because I think everyone's got their own bonuses. I'll take Bobby Decordova-Reid, for example. His out of possession work is exceptional. His ability to help out his fullback is a massive thing in this side, especially if we get, if we're under the cosh, if we've got overlapping fullbacks. he's key, but also he's really just a useful player who I think you get a baseline out of him. Like, you've got a base performance of like a 6 out of 10. I don't think you really ever get anything less than that from Bobby Reed.
Yeah.
Whereas on the other side, maybe Manor Solomon, not quite the same in the fact that he's a bit more mercurial. And I think sometimes, and we haven't seen, I think, a true bad performance or a frustrating performance from Manor Solomon yet. But I think the style of winger he is, who likes to take on a player, who likes to shoot from range, who likes to try tricks and take on a man, I think every now and then you are going to get a performance that does frustrate you because it's just not going to come off. Like, it happens with these wingers. So where do we sit in with these four wingers? Because I think it's a really tricky answer, because Willian started the season brilliantly as well, but is he at the same level of performance now? I'm not so sure.
I don't know. I think with Willian, I think his impact immediately was incredible. You see the experience and the quality from him in tight spaces. He has the ability to create something from nothing, which I think some of our wingers probably don't have. So I would always opt for him. I think he does also have the great link up with Mitrovic when Mitrovic is fit and available, and actually he might be able to bring the best out of someone like Vinicius. If we look at Bobby, I like Bobby, but he is like he's stuck. He's an in-betweener. He is going to be like, do I like Bobby in the team? Yes. Do I think Bobby is going to be replaced in the summer? Also, yes. I feel like there's probably going to be someone else that comes in there in the right wing that has the attributes to get to squeeze more from the game, to create more chances. I agree with you, though. I think Bobby gives us such defensive work rate in those wide areas that it enables wing backs of the highest quality to be nullified. But if you're Fulham and you're struggling to score goals, is that necessarily what you're looking for? Or is it going to be the attacking output that you have? I'd also like to throw in the ring that Neeskens Cabano is on his way back now. And Neeskens started the season exceptionally. And as someone that I think 2 years ago said that Neeskens probably needs another club, I'm very much eating humble pie after his exceptional start to the season. So, I could see him coming back into the fore for the last run of games and hopefully getting a run out, seeing how that Achilles has healed up. And then I think he can have an impact. I'm like you, I'm reluctant to cast people off too soon, but I think at the end of Dan James' experiment ran its course a few months ago. I think the final nail in the coffin might have been that Manchester United game at home when he was he couldn't even control the ball, let alone do anything with it. And I think his outing yesterday against Bournemouth, he somehow managed to get onto the pitch before Harry Wilson. I'm not sure how that happened, but again, a very little impact from Dan James. And as you said, unless we're going to look to come on and stretch the game, that's the only way I can see him playing. But we don't do that very often anymore. We did it at the start of the season when we were getting in behind with pace, but we've grown as a team since then, as a unit, and we don't do it. So yeah. I think my starting wingers would be Willian and Solomon, and you would invert them slightly if you could, or well, they're both inverted, if you will, but you would probably ask one of them to play slightly more on the outside than the other.
Yeah, and I think in that situation, I'd probably be more tempted to play Willian on the right than Manor Solomon, maybe. And maybe that's just because we know what Manor Solomon can do off that left flank in terms of cutting in and shooting. But I also think probably at the moment, I would say that Willian's end product in terms of creativity, not end product in terms of goals, but in terms of putting deliveries into the box, picking out a pass, is probably better. And so I'd probably be more confident with him going down the line and leave Manor cutting in. But the only one that I do think I would really like to see him come back into this team is Harry Wilson. He's been really poor, and it's really sad how poor he's been every time he's come on. But I just wonder if we just give it, as we said, we're not scrapping for our lives. We're safe, and I've seen some people asking the question: are we actually safe? For the record, we are safe. There's no way we're going down. I would like to see Harry Wilson get an opportunity in this side, give him a little bit of a chance to build some confidence, because the player we had last season was a huge reason why we won the league. His ability to get in behind, those sort of diagonal runs he makes off the right flank in between fullback and centre back, the number of times we got that going, I think was great. His left foot is fantastic. His creativity was really good. To get double figures assists is a big thing. I would really like to see him get a chance. And then I guess you've got that more natural flow going there where you've got a left footer on the right flank who likes to cut inside, and then one of Willian and Solomon on the left. But I guess there is no real perfect answer to this, because there's I don't think anyone has quite stuck their head up as far enough to be like they definitely deserve a starting spot. Maybe then probably Willian. I think Willian has shown a level of consistency this season that says that he probably should be in our best 11.
I totally agree. I just to add to that and top up is that 3 out of those 4 wingers that we've talked about so far have had quite significant injuries this year. Obviously you had Manor with his knee, Neeskens with the Achilles, and Harry with the, I can't remember what that was. Was it a hamstring injury?
I think it was a hamstring, but it was a long time he was out for.
Yeah. I think, if anyone wants to look forward to next season, and, hopefully all 4 of those are still on the books in some cases, that, that's a good building block to build on. And you have 4 very healthy wingers at the start of next season, and perfect. You add a couple more to that, and you add a creative midfielder and a little bit more depth in the middle. And I think, Fulham are absolutely cementing themselves on the upper echelons of mid-table, the 8th, 9th, 10th of this world. And I think that, for a club of our size and our budget, I'd be happy with that.
Definitely. I think that's a lovely place to end it, Jarms. I think there is an element of, still needing to be positive in this season, despite it feeling really difficult to right now, because we're in a great place. And you look at what's going on below us, and we should be thankful for our early season form, because you take 2 or 3 wins out of that and we are right in that mix as well. But we've got ourselves clear. We're 9 points ahead of Palace, who I think are the highest up team who is still in this relegation battle. And so, we've got to be thankful for that, because this is a horrible relegation scrap going on at the moment. And to be clear of that is fantastic. And we, Marcus Silva and the team deserve so much credit. And there's a lot to look forward to, but it's been a tough second half of the season. But let's not lose perspective on how good it's been overall. And I think that might be the nice next whiteboard episode coming your way. Might be a little look towards the summer, a little view of where Fulham need to strengthen, what we need to change, and probably as well who we need to keep, because I think there are some rumours going around of some key players that we really would like to not lose. But Jarms, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me, mate.
Yeah,
it's been great. I enjoy this.
Yeah, me too. It's been nice. It's always nice to get a bit of a more optimistic perspective after a poor run of fixtures. So we hope you enjoyed watching. As always, we're always welcome to any of your suggestions that you'd like us to talk about. But otherwise, hope you enjoy the rest of your week, and come on, you Whites.